And, if you give Ukraine a year or more to rebuild, I mean, I've seen how amazing they are at repairing damage, how incredibly resilient their people are, and how hardworking they are to fix things and do the impossible. Often, frankly, the kind of tactical prowess that they're sometimes credited with by breathless kind of accounts of what they'll do with, Patriot or F-16 or whatever else, are a bit overblown. But, in terms of the national effort that they put in and the production that they've achieved, whether it's, new electricity generation capacity, whether it's UAVs, whether it's repairing blast damage, clearing unexploded ordnance, it's astonishing. You give a country like that a year and a half, 2 years, they're going to be in a pretty good position to defend themselves, unless you have some sort of enforcement mechanism to force them not to, which again, they would never accept, quite rightly. So this idea that there's going to be some sort of ceasefire that lasts without an or else, or a tripwire force of European and ideally NATO peacekeepers in place to stop the Russians from starting it again, I just don't see how it happens. It's because we're so used to this thought that you do shuttle diplomacy and then eventually there's a ceasefire. Not if the aggressor thinks they're going to win and has a clear manpower and firepower advantage and sees all the diplomatic energy going their way. I mean, why on earth would the Russians actually stop? Or at least not for more than a couple of months. There's no or else. And, it was fascinating. There was, again, this interview with the Russian ambassador in London yesterday or today with the BBC, where it said, well, in the negotiations, are you prepared to give back any of the occupied territories to Ukraine, maybe in exchange for Kursk? The ambassador said, why should we? It wasn't we think we're right about that. It was just, why should we? And again, you have to have leverage in negotiations for you to get anywhere. And the US has just given all of its away and undercut all of Ukraine's and the Western allies' negotiating position by cutting them all out and indicating very strong support for the Russian position. So, yeah, I mean, if I was the Russians, and I'd just be stringing things along and keeping things going as they are, because Ukraine needs support to keep going. And every week or every month they don't get it. The position gets worse. Unless we're able to come up with some sort of or else, which might well be, for example, creative use of a mix of, for example, EU common defence funding and EU member state funding, plus, for example, frozen Russian confiscated assets to pay for US deliveries of aid, so that Trump can go back and say, see, we're putting leverage on to the Russians to try and force a ceasefire. I'm the consummate negotiator, and by the way, we're now not paying anything. In fact, other people are paying us. But on the current trend, I don't see any outcome that's not leading to a collapse, which then, of course, will hamstring the Trump administration, whether they like it or not, because they'll be dealing with a collapse of the European security architecture in physical terms, as well as in the diplomatic terms that they seem to be wanting to provoke, while trying to build a posture in Indo-PACOM, which relies on lots and lots of countries that traditionally sit on the fence and try to find accommodations between China and the US, opting for the US side in any clash in exchange for US security guarantees, which they're currently showing to be meaningless. Again, I've found it quite disorientating, to be honest, over the last few weeks, with people asking, for analysis, because I just genuinely don't see the logic or the way to logically analyze the positions that Trump and Vance have taken the last couple of weeks. It seems completely counterproductive, even to their own stated goals.
Well, one thing's for sure, negotiating a peace is a lot more complicated than what the Trump administration currently believes. And as you've laid out, what we're going to see is, based on that reality, what tack the Trump administration takes as this unfolds. So, Professor Justin Bronk, we always appreciate your insights. And obviously, as this situation unfolds, we're going to have plenty of occasions where we're going to need your expertise again. So I look forward to talking to you at that time.
Okay, thanks. Hopefully there's a change in the wind before we talk next time.